This is Mind Over Money, presented by Waymaker. Every generation encounters time and chance, and the impacts are different throughout history. So how does this idea of time and chance apply to us today? If you're in your 20s or 30s today, you have some great opportunities to take a hold of. So stick around as we discuss this. G'day Archie, g'day Tim.
Hello Archie, hey Lachy.
G'day Tim, g'day Lachlan. Looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, today we're talking about time and chance. Archie, what do we mean by this when we talk about time and chance?
So there's a lot of noise and negativity in around finances. So what can happen is through that noise and negativity, we can miss what's actually happening right now and what we have available to us right now. And the thing about time and chance is that it's different for every person, for every generation, as to what we have available in around finances. That's what this podcast is about, for us at this time. And so yeah, if we can understand that mindset of time and chance, we can start to clear the noise, the negativity, and see what's actually happening in our world.
So I guess to look forward, we probably need to first go back and learn from history. And we saw this image the other day of Brisbane in the 1850s. We're going to put a link in the show notes to that image. We're not sure who the image was from, sorry. So we can't give a credit to where it came from. But yeah, it just got us thinking, what was life back then like? From the image, you can see that there's some tiny little homes with what looked to be like iron or tin roofs. And two churches, massive graveyard in the middle of town. So it gets you thinking about what life would have been like back then as a 20 or a 30-year-old back in 1850.
Yeah. And look, there's probably the governor's house up on the hill because it's a massive structure compared to everything else. It's like,
yeah.
And, and typically, governors' houses were built out of sandstone, and they were really beautiful buildings. And of course, churches went on to be built out of stone as well, become really beautiful buildings. But these churches, they're just little timber shacks, basically. And the thing is, those shacks that you're looking at that people were living in, they're probably about, 20 square metres? It's probably about the size of them, 20 to 30 square metres. And they would have raised a family of 10 to 15 kids in that shack.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So different to today.
Yeah.
I'm doing all right in my 90 square meter townhouse then.
Yeah. With how many children, Tim?
Just two.
Two.
Just two.
Not 15.
No,
not 15.
Not even close.
So I guess wherever you drop a pin on the map of history, there's going to be problems, challenges, and also opportunities in each of those periods of time. If we think back through to the 1940s, let's say, or the 1950s, what do you think life was like back then, Archie? And what kind of opportunities and challenges were people facing?
Yeah, I'm going back to my family, family history for, on my mum's side and my dad's side, 1940s. So we've got World War II going through to 1945. There's a massive lack of food, lack of resources. There's just a huge lack that's going on there. There's big control. So in the 40s, the government was very much controlling people and controlling what was happening. And also society was very controlling, of the social norms that were expected of you back in that period there. Yeah. Very challenging time, We're losing people. People are coming back from war. Like for both my parents, their fathers came back from war and were totally messed up. And so that then led to lots of problems in the family situation. Yeah. And again, you've also got the opportunities, which was after the war, there was a lot of growth and, new jobs, new infrastructure. What's impacting is both positive and negative, that are going through there.
And what about in the 80s and 90s and then moving forward to today? How did that unfold?
Yeah. Oh, look, if you go into the 70s and 80s, we had massive interest rates, massive inflation. Banks controlled the finances in this country, and they were controlling how much money was being freely allowed to move through the country. And so if you didn't have a good relationship with your bank manager, you didn't get any money. And you were relegated to just living on your cash. So, which created opportunities for building societies to come into play, and building societies that help people buy houses because the banks wouldn't lend to them. And so we had people that paid off their homes in less than 10 years through that same period when banks were controlling and stopping people from getting money. These building societies popped up and people found a way to buy a home and pay it off really quickly, and they never became slaves to the banks. And I love meeting those people because they're all now retirees and getting into their 80s and 90s. And when you talk to them, they just have the best memories about how people found a way forward in that period and they all got into their own homes.
Love that.
Yeah.
And then in the 90s, we had a lot of deregulation, right? And things opened up even more.
Yeah. So 90s with deregulation in the banking industry, we were opened up to the whole banking world across the world. Lower interest rates, low inflation, again brought about by the central banks being put in place throughout different countries, including Australia. So they started to control the flow of money rather than the banks. And so again, massive opportunities, big changes in jobs, big changes in how people were earning their money. So if you had a physical job, your wages actually decreased and the professional jobs increased. And, there was a lot more money being earned in the professional world, such as accounting and finance and engineering and all the other professions that go through.
Some of that went backwards then in the 2000s, right? Because we had this big build-up in the 2000s and then a bit of a crash.
Yeah, look, back in the 70s and 80s, companies caused lots of problems with crashes and people losing money on companies and companies having bad impacts on environments and all sorts of working conditions and all sorts of things. So governments, fixed a lot of those problems. And so, coming into the 2000s, we have stronger companies, better paying positions and jobs in those companies, companies being a lot more stable, which is also great for investing. So suddenly we've got investing opening up and becoming really cheap and really productive. So, which is also when the superannuation system really kicked in. And so now we've got a superannuation system, with forced savings, lots of money being earned in that superannuation system, which is going to provide some fantastic retirements for a lot of people.
So that's a brief jot through history, but you can see, I love that because what I want listeners to catch is in each of these generations, back from the 1850s with that photo through to the 1940s where you started, all the way through the 50s to the 80s and 90s and then the 2000s, you can see that things are getting better. And yet there are still problems and even very similar problems to back in the 80s and 90s that we're facing today. And so we wanted to say all of that, listener, that what you're experiencing now, the noise and the negativity around home ownership, investing, the rich are getting richer, companies are failing us, this is not new. And every generation has this time and this chance given to them. And there are opportunities still available in whatever situation that we find ourselves. And of course, a lot of history, when you look back, does tend to repeat itself, just in different ways. And I guess this idea of time and chance, it's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah. So obviously there's people have always, through history, understood that there are times and chances and you need to be ready and look around at the right time and take your chance when it comes. And whether you're a farmer 2,000 years ago or you are here today trying to buy a house or invest or decide what to do with your future in your 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we can learn so much from the past and it's really important to look back and understand what's happened, but also that can, we can copy and paste what has been done and that doesn't always work. So like we've talked about, maybe you saw your parents do well in the 70s buying a property for $10,000. And then you see it gone 10x or 100x. And then you think, okay, now the sole focus. We need to be in property, or not that that's bad, but we can let what's worked before kind of laser focus us into this is the only thing that does work. And maybe we need to open our eyes and look around and say, okay, actually, like you guys were saying, things are getting better and better. And actually, there's more kind of opportunities and options now than maybe ever.
Yeah. As the baton gets passed down through the generations, we have to still pick it up and find what's going to work for here and now, and take the wisdom from the past, but also be open to what's actually happening right now in our life, in our country, the economy. These days, we have so many options for careers and options that suit each personality. And you can change careers quite easily today and work and live in different places.
Especially when we look at how we've got this low unemployment at the moment. So we've got pretty much full employment. So that makes it easy for us to change jobs. And, so if you're working in that industry where you're helping people, find jobs and change careers, you guys are going to be doing really well at the moment, because there's going to be a lot of change, which is what we saw back in the early 2000s. We saw that full employment, and we saw people changing jobs quite a lot. We saw people go from earning $50,000 a year to $100,000 a year back then, because they were able to change jobs and progress and get into a better company, get into a better job, better situation.
And I guess companies are willing to spend more on talent.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we've got a shortage of talent. So, yeah, now's a great time to be looking at that.
To be a hard worker, there's a time and chance.
Yep.
Get in there, work hard, and I think companies are desperate for good people.
And the thing about property, like you brought up there, Tim, is that opportunities around property are different for every person, depending on circumstances, depending on income, depending on where you live, depending on what's happening in the property market, that you're looking at. So, and again, banks have got tighter. We're finding that at the moment. To get a loan through is a lot harder now. So that's going to put pressure on the property market not to grow, unless people have free money that's not coming through lending. So we are going to see suburbs that still go ahead because people have free money. They've retired. They've got access to a lot of money, which allows them to buy into a suburb and pay a premium to get a house. But for other people, they can't buy into that suburb because they can't borrow enough.
That's interesting. It shows how much nuance and complexity is in our property market now, and how you just can't go off the generic hotspot growth belt lists or all that kind of stuff you read online.
Yeah.
The way in which property is going to grow going forward is going to be highly complex, and it requires that nuance of understanding of where the money's moving and how access to capital is affecting certain suburbs over other suburbs. So it really confirms the idea that there is no one property market in Australia. There are hundreds and even thousands of markets within markets, even in one city. Different parts of a city can be doing well for certain times. It's very hard to predict that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, look, I can go back to the 90s, and there was a guy who was a postal delivery guy. So he's on a low wage. But he saw an opportunity in his suburb, which was very low cost, that he could save enough money each year to buy a property and only borrow a small amount against that property. And so over a period of 10 years, he bought 10 properties in his suburb because he had the opportunity. And he was a very low income earner, but he had the opportunity, he saw it, and he took it. And the next 10 years saw all of those properties double in price, but that was his time and chance. And he actually became a very wealthy retiree, but that was in his 50s that he had that time and chance. Yeah. And the property market was just sitting in the right place. The banks were lending money. Everything came together for him at that point in time.
So thinking about today, like what you're talking about right now, we're facing a bit of a credit crunch where banks are not approving loans as easily because of the rates going up. But that's still very short term. And we saw how much things have changed just coming out of COVID, which was 2 years ago, and from ultra low to ultra high. And it's going to change again. And so just for listeners to keep that in mind, that what's happening right now also won't stay as it is forever. You know, things will change over the next 12 months even, and we'll be on this podcast in 12 months' time talking about it again. But I guess what we want to get across here today is a message of positivity and optimism that when we look through history where we are today, we actually have so much freedom in how the banks are operating and also how technology is operating and our careers and the way society is just so open and free today, and we can move about and we can pick up our lives and go overseas or move state or, plant in a suburb and we can start a business. There's so many things that's available to us. Live in the bush like Archie, get an acreage and get some fruit trees. Look, a lot of young people are doing that. It's quite a trend.
Hey, I did it in the 90s and it failed. I was before my time. And whereas now it's the rage now, and it's like
it was before Starlink.
Yes, before Starlink. Hey Tim, my technology back in the 90s was the landline phone, which cost me $30 a month.
Yeah, true. I guess that was you'd be driving.
That was the only thing that actually worked on the property was the landline phone. we didn't even have electricity.
Wow, yeah. No DocuSign. There's a trip in the ute to get one signature, a 2-hour trip.
Yeah, we had to go to the bank to get signatures on loan documents.
That sounds awful.
Then. The good old days.
Okay, everyone, we're going to pause here. We're going to go to a break. We'll be back in a minute. So, Archie, where does this idea of time and chance come from? Because it's scattered throughout history, right? All the way back to, I guess, biblical texts.
Yeah, well, we're going back to, for me, I'm going back to King Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes. And so, what's that, 3,000 years ago, even closer to 4,000 years ago. It keeps coming back up, throughout history. Through the different writers, through the Roman writers and Greek writers, through time there. What Ecclesiastes, the King Solomon's saying is that life isn't predictable. And, he's saying like in a race, the winner isn't always the swiftest because the person that's the fastest could fall over, and we've seen that in the Olympics where the fastest actually fall over and the one that's right there that's done all the work to get there suddenly wins the race, because they did all the hard yards, they did the 10 years preparation, and they were in the race, and they still managed to win the race because the swiftest guys fell over. It also says that wealth is not to the wise. So it's not wisdom that gives you wealth. It all comes back to time and chance. And the classic I think of here is that if you were a miner 200 years ago, you were the lowest paid. Your lifespan was short because you were thrown underground. There was cave-ins, there's coal dust, all the other problems that went with mining. So it was the worst job you could have. And today, mining is an amazing job to have because it pays so well. There's so many different career paths in mining, and so much that comes out of it, so much safety now compared to 200 years ago. So again, it's time and chance. So 200 years ago, you didn't want to be a miner, but today, being a miner is actually a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about mining, and I think we've touched on a few of these, but if you're in your 20s, 30s now, what are some of the opportunities you see, Archie, going forward, things to consider and think about in our world now? Yeah.
So in your 20s and 30s now, you've got the opportunity to invest very, very low cost. And just taking a small amount of money and investing it is going to generate a huge amount of money throughout your life. We're actually talking millions that can come from just like $100,000 or $200,000, which is just taking a small amount of money each year, putting it away, investing it. Whereas, our parents didn't have that opportunity. When you go back into the 70s and 80s, even 60s and 50s, if you're going back further, to invest, you had to go with the companies and buy shares in those companies. You had to pay big money to be able to do that. And then those companies failed, so you lost your money. Whereas today, there's so much good research. There's fund managers who will actually manage the money and keep it safe. And that way you can't actually lose your money, and so you can just park your money and let it grow. That's a great opportunity that wasn't there before.
There's so much diversification, and even with our super's not tied to one company. It can be separate and follow us. Even with the recent changes to super, it can follow us throughout our different jobs. We can move careers, and I think I agree. This is the big benefit. I think this could be our time and chance for young people. Oh. It doesn't matter which career you have, or even chasing a high income. What you have is over the next 10 and 20 years to be putting a little bit of money into investing and let that thing grow as you're changing careers, as you're figuring out that career path. And doing what you love and exploring that, you can take a little bit of your income and grow it over time because we have access to great investment vehicles and options. And I think that is our time and chance. And of course, we're going to have those big moments when we buy a property. And those moments are going to be challenging as well because we do have challenges around that. And that's why we have Waymaker and our mortgage brokers to help people overcome those challenges and to get into a property. But like you said, Tim, before, that's not the main strategy or the only strategy that we have today. We have so many options. And I guess with that also comes paralysis choice. What do we do? Yes. I know. Yes. I feel that as a young person. I'm like, wait, what's the strategy again? There's so many different things we can do. And again, that's why we need someone like an advocate to help us, clear the noise and explore which opportunities could be great for us.
Yeah. And look, the classic with the house is that you buy a house in your 20s and pay that thing off in 7-10 years. You can free up so much cash flow to then travel with your family, to pay for schools, because you're not paying a big home loan anymore. And so we've got to get rid of that noise, where people are thinking about a home loan is just like paying rent, because that's a real false assumption. And it's one that's, locking people into long-term debt, which in this day and age we don't have to have. Like, we can be debt-free within 5-7 years if we want to be and own a home. Yeah. It's all about strategy. It's all about looking at what's our opportunity right now, what's our moment that we've got right now. Like, I'm working with people in their 50s who are going to be able to buy their first home and pay it off in less than 10 years. Because of, again, time and chance, with their incomes and their situation, they're in that position. So getting into a home, great way to move ahead financially.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, like Lockie mentioned, you got that analysis paralysis at the moment, that problem. And we have all these different opportunities. But like Archie was saying, there are great strategies. There's a lot of rubbish strategies, but there are really great strategies. But for that to work, you need to stick to it. like anything, for a diet to work, you need to stick to it. And these strategies they might be 5, 7, 10 years. But I just encourage you. That's why keep bringing yourself back to the goals and the why you're doing something. And remember, get some people around you, like whether that's Waymaker, like listening to this podcast, some consistent voice that's going to encourage you through the seasons when you think, oh, why are we doing this again? Because we all forget over time. But there's a strategy, and if you see the strategy through, I think there's a lot of great opportunities for you.
Yeah, I think we're in the middle of the year right now, but if you're listening to this episode and you're listening to maybe at the start of the year, you'll know that we tend to overestimate what we're going to achieve in a year. But what I also find is true is that we underestimate what we can achieve in 5 years. And I'm encouraging people buying a home right now to get in their psyche when they pick a price, when we're determining what they're going to spend on a home based on their lending, to think about what and how much they can pay down their home in that 5 years, because that is where they're going to break the back of the interest, break the back of the loan, and really start to push ahead and move ahead and start to free up cash flow to actually start investing and really put themselves in a great place and get that debt, that weight off their back. And so you're right. There's so many opportunities we have today But there's also so much noise, and we tend to jump around between strategies and change our minds every year. But just the power of sticking with something for 5 years is hugely underrated, I think. And hopefully people listening to this, that challenges your mindset.
Yeah. Look, we've got people there in the property market who've had to wait 15 years to get a breakthrough in the property side of things, in their property investing, and to come out the other side and actually have some decent cash flow. And, 5 years in, they were struggling. And I'm saying, look, you got to keep going. This is not a short-term, project that you got here. You got to keep going. For other people, they didn't have enough time to keep going. So other people had to pull out of the property market because it wasn't working for them. And again, that's a time and chance thing. But for those guys that hung in there, that were able to hang in there, young enough, push through massive cash flow problems, they've come out the other side and they're looking so good now. And they can relax now and enjoy the rest of their life because they made it through. But it took 15 years. For other people, we've got other people who've come through and paid off their home in 7 years, and they're now able to sit back and relax and let their strategy run. And because that's put them in a great position that all of their strategy is now in place and working, and only took 7 years. But again, it was time and chance. So everyone's going to be different depending on the strategy, depending on how old they are and what's happening in their life.
Love that. Well, let's wrap up. I guess today we're just here to remind you that this ancient idea still carries through today of time and chance. It happens to us all. Yeah. And we've got lots of opportunities ahead of us today that we can take a hold of. So if this has created some questions, please reach out. We'd love to chat to you. You can click the link in the show notes. There's a little form online. You can leave a question or a comment or feedback or ask us something that you want us to discuss on this podcast. But yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Archie. Thanks Tim.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks Lachlan. Thanks Tim. Thanks for everyone listening. And please share it with your friends and your family. Because sometimes, family think that you might be doing something really weird, as we talked about earlier. And it's good for them to actually hear from the source.
That's it. Cool. All right, guys. Have a great week.
This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. If you'd like to speak to someone about your personal finances, including your home loan, head to waymakerpodcast.com.au to connect with one of our wealth partners.